Peter, I'd like to start with you because we've met. I remember it was a Christmas party, where our common friend introduced us, and he told me that he plans to invest in your company, and he told me that I should mark his words because this company is going to be amazing. And it was shortly after 2 years, this company made headlines because you were sold. I think it was a very interesting journey, not just because it was quick, but also because the company is doing something which is super hard to do, and it's only a few companies are able to do it, and some companies already died along the way. Can you please give us an idea of how the idea was born and how you met it, Lukas?
Sure, and thank you for having me here and Lukas tonight. Seems like the world is fighting with coronavirus, so I'm happy we could make this happen, and thanks everybody who is joining on the remotely. So we knew Lukas back from our Oxford days. I started there in 2011, and Lukas was already doing his undergrad there since like 2008, I think, right? Yep. And so when you come to Oxford, what is really nice is there are like people from your country, and that's how we actually like build really good relationships. So we kind of got to know each other back then, and then after my master's degree, I went to do PhD. Lukas went to do his PhD. It turned out these two PhDs were in very similar fields. So then when we were finishing our PhD, it was the idea like we could do something together in this space. And we could see that the space was generally growing, and there were like a lot of things to be built. So we are talking about like 2016 when we started. So self-driving was in full swing, starting augmented reality. That was just the time when Pokemon Go like really was launched. So people started to believe like augmented reality is gonna be the part of the future. So there started to be like this market traction on these technologies, and actually like the technology that underlies augmented reality and technology that powers self-driving cars, there is like a lot of similarities. And so it happened that both me and Lukas were doing PhDs in these fields, and so we decided to start a company that would be addressing some of these problems. And we knew like there are technologies that are fundamentally needed to make this application actually possible. So that's where we focus, and that's where the idea came from. So Lukas, do you wanna elaborate?
Yeah, I think that sums it up pretty well. And yeah, we were both working on computer vision, and we were looking at different applications. And as we were starting, we basically looked into several different places. We started talking to investors, started talking to potential customers, and that kind of managed. Through that, we managed to narrow it down through this idea of the large-scale localization and mapping, and that's what we ended up working on for the next couple of years. And in some way, we're still working on that.
So let's dive into this a little bit. So you had this idea, and how much time did you spend on fine-tuning the idea before you felt it's ripe for speaking with others and getting it to the next level?
So before like we went through, I think like you have this conversation about what could be like the possible application like all the way through, and like yes. It takes some time until it matures. So we started actually experimenting back in Y Combinator, and at the time there was apparent need, like computer vision is the technology that is going to be needed across the sectors, but it was not quite clear like which specific application should it be. And that was something like where we explored actually a number of ideas, and some of them turned to be like not useful at all. But one of the
Give us an example. What kind of ideas?
So, for example, it's very useful for, let's say, mobile phone to tell what's there. Like, for example, you show a pen on a camera, and somehow the computer vision recognizes, oh, this is pen or this is banana. These are broadly like very useful topics that are like the fundamentals. But when you think about like how do you actually turn that into like revolutionary product, that's not clear. So that is like the problem of recognition. So, but some of the things were coming to us like they could actually have some defensibility over time, and they are something more like infrastructure elements behind self-driving cars and behind augmented reality. And one of these fundamental problems is that we were coming over and over as like the fundamental requirement to make these things work, that we didn't just see any solution out there right now, is like being able to tell like when you are holding the phone, where is it with centimeter accuracy. So right now you have like GPS, and that's, for example, what is having accuracy plus minus 10 meters. And
yes.
If you play like these earlier versions of Pokemon Go, like you could see like avatar, and you could see there, but anybody who's playing the game couldn't see it at the same place. And the fundamental reason why this is not is because this shared backend that would be joining my experience with somebody else's experience was missing. And this is the problem that we decided to solve at scale. And it's being solved by being able to tell exactly where this piece of hardware is based on what it sees. So we decided to build that kind of thing. And this is like the problem that is needed for that augmented reality, but it's also needed for self-driving. For self-driving to work, the car needs to know like where it is on the road and what's around it. And the current solution in self-driving that I used at the time to solve this problem, but using LiDAR, and they cost like hundreds of thousands of dollars per unit to actually make work. So yes, we were like, can we use some cheap hardware, just where like the camera on the mobile phone to basically achieve the same level of performance? So that's how we identified like this is valuable problem, and this is like actually like two application domains. And in the end, like we were more focused on augmented reality, and it's quite interesting that now back we are again working on self-driving cars. So it actually, this technology found use in both of these.
Yes, it was a good call. Now, you had the idea, in this way you tested the idea. Let's talk about the team. How did you put the team together? So I know you were doing your PhD, right?
Yeah.
And how did you two meet? And how did you bring in other team members at the beginning?
So, Lukas, do you want to?
Yeah. So, yeah, like Peter said, we already knew each other at the time from our time in Oxford together. So Peter just called me one day and told me about an idea that he has, like that maybe we could have a look, start looking into something in this space. And then as we were discussing it more and more, we realized that we'll probably need some advice from people who've done it before. So we reached out to some of our joint friends that we knew from Oxford and from our previous experiences. And so they jumped on board. They helped us get funding and get through the first few rounds of conversations with investors. And yeah, I think Peter basically reached out to first two people that we knew back home in Slovakia, Czech Republic. There was like there's a really strong community of very talented software engineers that are doing all these different competitions. So Peter reached out to two friends there, and those were the two first engineers that joined. And as soon as we secured the funding, we bought them a flight ticket to London, and we started working the next day.
Okay, and you have not one, not two, but more co-founders. Why is that?
So in the end, I had 5 people as co-founders. I think that and what is really interesting, like each of these people were bringing different angle of experience. So Andre and Brian, they were more on the business side. They went through their own startups, build their own businesses. So they were bringing that kind of experience of what does it take to build a company. So it's not just like when you are going to build your startup, it's not you are just going to build this like new cool technology. That's what something like me, Lukas, and Hugo were bringing. But it's really about you are going to be managing the team. You will get to be dealing with things like cash flow. Product fit is immensely important. You get to be dealing with customers. So I think that is something that we are super grateful that Andre and Brian joined us on this journey and helped us on that. Because both me and Lukas, we were coming at that point directly from PhD. We were kind of experts in the field, but we were not really experienced building the teams at scale. That's something where the experience was very valuable.
Yes, Lukas, you were working with Brian and Andre on a companies before. Can you compare your experience of what happened in the previous company and how did the working relationship quality and the quality of the output after you had this experience influenced the success of Blue Vision?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I met Andre and Brian when, in 2012, I think, when they were starting Prizio, and I was one of the first engineers there, so I was working on the backend systems there with them, and yeah, it was a very interesting experience. So it was something new. It was the first time I was working for a small company, for a startup that was just starting up, and it just really, it was a really good experience to see how diverse set of problems people need to solve in startups. Just even as an engineer, one day I was solving one problem that I knew nothing about, and I had to learn everything about it from scratch, find resources and everything. Next week I was solving a completely different problem. Again, I had to learn everything about it, and I just really enjoyed this very quick learning experience where I was basically forced to do so many different things and learn so many different things. Then afterwards, I had some experience working for companies like Google, and when I was comparing these two experiences, I just realized okay, the startup experience is really interesting and really challenging, but I enjoyed it because I felt like it pushed me further, and that's why I decided I would like to start some startups. So when I would like to join some startup or continue in this field. And so, yeah, when the opportunity arose and Peter came to me with the idea, then I was very open to it, and I was very happy to try. And working with Andre and Brian was really interesting. So it was their first startup back then, and it was also very interesting to see how much they have evolved and changed in the meanwhile as they had more experience. But already back then, they were both very strong. Andre had very good product focus, and that was one of the things that I learned there, that it's really important to know what you're building, what is the product, what your customers want, or potential customers might want, and really focus on that, and not do shortcuts on these things. So those, yeah.
I agree. Okay, so now Peter, you had you had built this MVP, the first version. You tested it. You had an idea of which direction should be useful, and you were still in the stealth mode. Can you please tell us why you decided to be in stealth and not to talk to people publicly? Or what's the upside of that? And at which point did you decide to speak to investors?
Yeah, so for us, we actually, we were a little lucky, I would say, in this. I know that many people like spend time fundraising for months. So we actually, like we were rushing to finish our PhD because like funding was already secured and we got to finish. I remember that like I was submitting my thesis one day and next day we got incorporated. And so actually we started like real company after, like before it was more like you are trying your ideas and so on. But when you are going, okay, we are a company, that came like when we were able to like secure the funding or seed round. And I think that like one of the things that when you are doing startup, you have just one is like your focus. And like when you go and when you are talking about what you do, it's you can do that through like your website and everything, but we were talking to our customers that we looked at the time were like big companies, something like Google or Facebook, and that is more done through like B2B relationships when you know somebody there and you have the meeting to understand like what are the biggest problems of the field, what can you build such that it would be like meaningful at grand scale. So for that, we actually like didn't need to be like publicly saying, and also your idea evolves. So you are like kind of updating, updating your deck and your idea and your prototype and everything. So I think that our decision then to go to disclose more came with when we had our first product ready, and it was about to get some traction from the developers. That's where we like doubled down on our presence. And before it was more about we are building this, we want to be super focused, we don't want to be distracted. And during the time we had like the meetings with our potential clients, and that was the mode of the operation.
Okay, so you spoke with potential clients, you say, when it came to raising some funding for the company, you were quite successful. You raised from Google Ventures and Accel and Horizon Ventures, very good companies as the Angel. How did you get those meetings, and how successful did you feel those meetings were going at the beginning?
I think we had quite a few connections already, like coming from different sources or so, or other co-founders brought their connections. I think then it really comes about if you have something valuable, like these people will become interested. So we are talking like on the product side more about like the people at large companies who are like, let's say, the main product managers, and they know about all the problems that are kind of valuable to them. And when we are doing something that is interesting to them, that could solve some of these problems, like they want to talk to you as well. So this is something that how we can get these meetings. You need to have some good proposition for them, and then when you like growing these meetings to like referrals and so on, then also reaching out to investors when you already are at this level of traction with your potential clients, it's also significantly easier. So I think like it's almost like snowballing effect. Like I would not underestimate the value of the network. Then knowing like what is valuable to who. And for us, like we were trying to solve this very hard problem, and it's about like knowing who are the people for who this is valuable. This could save a lot of money, such that you can get some feedback on like whether like the direction of what we are building is valuable. So that's like kind of one angle of that.
I understand. Lukas, we have a question here on Slido. And the Slido, Dylan from Slido is asking, how and at what stage did you manage equity splits among co-founders? There were 5 of you. Was it hard to negotiate or agree on who gets how much, or it was a no-brainer?
So that was done right at the beginning when we were incorporating. And I guess it helped that we all knew each other, and so we were friends. We managed to come to some agreement quite quickly, I would say. So that wasn't that much of an issue for us. Yeah. Might be different if you don't know the person. So yeah, might be different if you are starting up, so that's someone completely new.
Yes.
But as we knew each other, I think that wasn't an issue.
Okay, Peter, when you raised the funding and then you had some significant cash for the company to spend on, how did you invest it, and how did it change the culture of the company?
Yeah, well, I think like that really evolves. Just like I just remember vividly like the stories when like we were checking the bank account and we got that there like 2.5 million, and I was like, I've never seen that many zeros on the account that are like not just like. Yeah. So I think that it was really cool to kind of experience that, and I was like, at that point I felt like I'm never gonna be able to spend this much amount of money. It turns out like you can spend money very quickly. So in the end, like at the beginning, what we were spending money was really like paying people. We just rented a really big flat, like 2 floors. We moved all in, we were living there, working there, we were hiring people. So at some point, like there were like 12 people working in like in a flat. It was kind of starting to be like crowded. So that was like the time when we realized like we probably need some real office, not just like you are sitting on a beanbag coding all day and like having a beer in the evening. So I think like then when you go from that kind of hacker house into that kind of office, like that changed culture quite a bit, I think.
Yes.
And then I think when we were doing Series A, and we got like 40 million, that's to me it was like the most important thing is like that initial 2.5 million give you kind of like a shot on like trying to do some MVP, but the additional funding was something like we will get a shot to actually build useful product and launch it.
Yes.
So I think like for me it was more about like now we got that opportunity, and
I understand. We have a question here on Slido from Gabor. He wants to know if it was difficult to negotiate IP with the university. Was Oxford supportive in this sense?
So luckily, what we were working on at Blue Vision was different enough from what we were working on during the PhD. And it's very important, I would suggest like anybody who's coming from the university to be like super clean on this. Like just use completely new hardware, make sure there is no overlap of any IP with what you were working at uni. So we actually didn't have a problem with that.
Okay. Now, when you already started to work more seriously, the news about the company came out, and you became known in the area. How did you perceive the progress of the competition, and how much did this influence you and the way you're working? It's also a question from Slido.
Yeah, Lukas.
Yeah. So yeah, it was quite interesting. So at the beginning, the competition changed quite a bit. At the beginning, there weren't that many players working on what we were looking at. So when we look at it, for example, from the point of view of augmented reality, when we started, there were new companies coming up, but they were mostly focusing still on the single player experience, like single user experiences, how to make it work really well on the phone, and how to make the AR slightly better. We were looking at it from like a different angle. So we were looking at it from, okay, how can we make this multi-user experience? How can we make it work in the whole city rather than just your room? And so I think that was a good decision that we made, because eventually Google came with AR Core, Apple came with AR Kit, and a lot of these companies that were working on improving AR actually now had a very serious competition. While for us, it was actually really good, because as we were approaching it from the other end, suddenly both ends started to get really close together, and we were able to do something that none of the competition could. And so there was, we got this head start on the competition. Like after AR Kit, AR Core came up, companies started to look into this large-scale localization mapping, but we already were ahead, and we already had something working before anyone else. So yeah, that was.
Yes, it seems like you guys were also a bit lucky, because it was a big hype, maybe 18 months, maybe 2 years ago, where everybody was working on this exciting topic of self-driving technologies, and there were lots of companies. Some of them are not here anymore. They didn't make it. You went in the right direction in terms of teaming up with a big player who has a chance of making a big change. How many potential partners did you first at the beginning did you think about, and why did you end up making this strategic partnership with Lyft?
So I think one of the things in building a startup is timing. I think everybody kind of says
That's
this.
very true.
And I cannot just like stress it enough. Also, like given that both me and like Lukas, we were in research, one of the things that you get from working in research is that research community is much ahead of any product. Like when I was working at Oxford doing my PhD, we were working like on like really cutting edge like systems that were not in any product yet. You could see all these kind of like somebody made a demo or something like that. So you could see like there is a lot of potential. So you have that kind of benefit of seeing like the future few years ahead. And that helps you to kind of like then set like which of the components are actually worth focusing on. And then if you are lucky and you can exploit the timing, which I think what we did was really great, because there was really the time when AR was going into that swing and so on. So I think that was very important. And I think timing came also when we decided to sell the company. So in the end, what happened was we built this technology, like it was a huge achievement. Everybody we shown the demo in these companies, like they couldn't believe. We were
really?
I
want to see the demo now.
We were large scale demos. Like maybe you can go to the internet, type Blue Vision Labs, and like the video comes to you, and so all that video is real. There is like no editing, nothing.
Yeah.
So we were doing these demos in San Francisco that like let's say Facebook sent like a bus of computer vision people. we gave them mobile phones, and the experience you had on mobile phone, like you could pick your avatar, and then you were like living in virtual world. You can see other people. They had avatar on top of their head. You could be like playing games, collecting coins. You can be tagging things and so on. And it was so much fun. So we got to the stage where like the technology was working, and it was about next step was like, how do you make it actual business that becomes profitable? And I think like there you need to make a choice, like whether you will try to do it yourself, or you join some other platform that that already has potential to use this technology at scale.
Yes, and you said you already shown the platform to a few big players. You're mentioning Facebook, Lyft. Who were in your top 3 list, and why did you decide to go with Lyft, if it's not a secret?
Well, I cannot be naming all the companies, but there were like a number of companies. We basically had the contact almost to all the big companies in Silicon Valley. In the end, it came to Lyft was really well positioned to take the advantage of the technology and bring it to the next level. So one of the problems, for example, in the augmented reality space, is being able to find where is your car. So that's one of the problems that could be solved in augmented reality. But more importantly, they were starting their self-driving car efforts as well, and they were looking for the technology like the one that we built.
Yes,
we could see this kind of double impact on two sides, and that's like how we made our choice.
Lukas, you as a CTO of the company, being responsible for the technology, why do you think Blue Vision was ahead of the competition? When we talk about companies like Facebook, I'm sure they don't have shortage of engineers. How was the technology you built differently, and why was it so much ahead of the competition where they have enough resources to build it themselves?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess one reason kind of comes down to the usual bigger company versus a startup, where startup is more nimble. We can test things out more quickly. We can do things that bigger companies cannot do as easily. Like if we wanted to test something out, we just took the equipment, went somewhere, did some tests, and we just like repeated until it worked. And I think one of the key things that we did that was very important was that this large-scale mapping and localization is a difficult problem, both from a computer vision standpoint and from infrastructure and standard algorithms and backend processing. And so it's like a bunch of very difficult problems combined together. And I think what a lot of the companies, maybe bigger companies, do when they approach these problems, they look at it, they have a lot of researchers looking at it from a research perspective and trying to really solve these difficult problems that you are trying to solve when you're doing research. But what we did instead is we tried to take a little bit more pragmatic approach. So we tried to make sure that we do not solve difficult problems that we do not need to solve. So we basically, I think, thanks to the team that we hired, we were able to combine engineering and research in a way that we were able to move very quickly, and we were able to use relatively simple solutions combined well together to solve at the end of the day a very difficult problem.
That's a very good point. So it's basically, so we focused on what's important. You testing, and you just progress fast. It's a good call. Now, both of you became in the process. You also kind of when the company was sold to Lyft, you lived through the IPO, right? Which was also quite exciting because there was this race of which company is going to IPO first. Will it going to be Uber or Lyft? And there was some rumors running around where the first company is going to be the best position for having a good IPO, which actually turned out to be true. How did you remember living through the IPO? Was it exciting for you? Was it scary? What were your perceptions at the time?
Well, I don't know like how much I can comment on this. I think it's one of the stages of the company that I think it's more rare to experience. But I think like it's not as like your life suddenly changes. So I think it's more for the people who are thinking about like the valuations, who are thinking about like the bankers and the finance world. But I don't think it makes like huge impact on your life in general.
Yes. So now you are both employees of Lyft. Now we're not founders anymore. On the other hand, I think it's a good fact that you're also running the R&D part of Lyft. Is this correct?
Yeah,
so it's a big responsibility. We have a question here from Uri. What has changed after you joined Lyft in terms of culture and the working environment and the pace at which you're working right now?
Lukas, do you want to comment?
Yeah, so some things definitely changed. Like now we are not, like you said, we are not just working on our own as a startup. We are part of a bigger team, and we need to make sure and we need to like sort of get used to the processes that bigger companies use. And I think it was actually good in some ways because it brought some order into the way we were working. On the other hand, processes always can slow it down a little bit. So those kind of like both of that. The culture, I must say that I personally very much enjoy the culture at Lyft. And it's very open. People are very happy to help each other out. And I don't think there were maybe like as many changes there. Like we had a lot of people who had experiences working for companies like Google, Facebook previously anyway in the team. So I think we try to have a similar kind of engineering culture as these companies, and Lyft is also very similar to them. So it wasn't as much of a change, but yeah, I think everyone enjoyed having now a support of a much larger team and people happy to work together to solve even bigger problems. So
yeah, we had Logan, the founder of Lyft, a startup guy maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and he's known to be one of the nicest person in this space. Can you confirm?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I hope this is not gonna affect the stock price of Lyft now.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So let's take a few minutes and discuss some questions from people on Slido. Let's take a question from Alexa. She wants to know, what's your advice to launching a new startup post CV? I think maybe she means after you finish university.
Oh. I think that I think it's about like what I would be optimizing is gaining experience and as fast as possible, validating the idea, getting the advice.
Sorry, she means what's your advice to launching a new startup after the coronavirus?
Coronavirus.
Even more topical, yes.
I see. I don't know, actually. Probably, from my experience, is that if somebody goes to a startup, like that, as a founder, during the journey, you will experience significantly like wider range of experiences than that we are facing right now. So I would say like get prepared. Maybe this is like a training. So that's kind of my 2 bits.
Yeah, I guess one thing that seems to be very important these days is to be very remote friendly. So maybe that might be a thing to bear in mind starting a startup after all this goes.
Good point. Another question from Paul. After having such a big success in your first job, is it difficult to start your second company? Lukas, this is not your first company. So you already mentioned Prizeo, and you said it gets much more difficult for the second company. Is it true?
So it was more difficult, but for a different reason, I would say. So in Prizeo, I was just an engineer working on technical problems, while now I was a founder with a lot more responsibility. So yeah, like being a founder definitely brings a lot more responsibility than being an employee. As for starting a second startup after you started the first one, I would probably say that it should be easier because you already learned a lot of things. You already gained a lot of network, like a lot of people in your network, and yeah, you can build up on your experience. So I would probably say that second would be easier.
Okay, Peter, a question from Jesse. What advice would you say to yourself before you started your first startup? Now looking back.
Yeah, I don't know whether like there would be something that I would specifically say, like, you know, I wish I like, of course you make your mistakes, you learn a lot. It's almost like when you ask people like what would they tell to their, I don't know, 16-year-old. So
Yes.
this kind of advice never really works, and the reason is that it's very hard for the people to understand the complexity of the situations that are just ahead of them. It's really about that experience that needs to be gained, and people just didn't found like effective shortcuts for that. So I think like one thing though I see that a little more junior people do is like they come with a lot of illusion about what it could be or what it should be, and I think that like it's gonna be tough. You just got to keep working and be open-minded and like push through. It's not gonna be nice.
I agree. Now, Lukas, one more for you from Jesse. Do you think the augmented reality market or sector is in general still in its infancy? Do you think it is now mainstream? Maybe you've seen the announcement of the iPad Pro now. It also has some AR features. How do you rate? Is it still in the early stages, or we are getting to the stage where it's going to be everywhere?
I think we're getting closer to it. So the technology definitely is a lot more mature. When we were doing our PhDs and we were starting the company there, there wasn't even any AR kit or AR core, and all that was there was demos from research teams basically. Now it's a part of consumer product, like you mentioned, iPad, all iPhones and Android phones like use AR, like have AR capabilities. So the technology is definitely maturing. I think the thing that really needs to happen in order for this to become mainstream is the killer application, something that will really really make you wish that you use augmented reality to in that way, like, you know. So there's a lot of applications that are nice.
Wasn't it Pokemon Go, the killer application? Everybody was playing it, no?
Yeah, that's
yeah, that was one kind of augmented reality, but I guess like the kind you mentioned in iPad, or the kind of people often think about with the glasses, or seeing things like exactly where they are in the world. That is still there still isn't really an application, maybe apart from arranging your furniture, where you really want to be using it. And I think that's missing, the killer application there. And once that comes, it will become mainstream. Technology is there, it seems. So.
Okay. On the final note, I see both are working from home today. Can you share with us what is the working culture like? Like now, it's probably all the companies are working from home. But what is the approach your current employer, Lyft, is having you do? How do you work, and is the company built by default as a remote company? Peter.
So I think that we are following the advice of the government for working from home, and that's something that we are a little bit getting used to. I think everybody's getting used to that, but I think like already before, because we were like the office in London and HQ is in Palo Alto, so we kind of got like a flavor on what does it mean when you need to be asynchronously syncing, when you need to have VC meetings and all these things. So I think that this is just a bit more adjustment to that, but I don't think it's as major for us specifically.
Okay, yeah. Lukas, last one for you. What is in store for us? What can we look forward to coming from Lyft? Do you see Lyft coming to Europe soon, or it's going to be focusing on the US market?
I'm afraid I can't comment on this, and I don't even know myself. So yeah, I can't really say more.
Okay, good. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate that. So if there's any way which we can help you at Startup Grind, let us know. It's definitely an inspiring story. Congratulations. I hope it's not the last one. We are both super young, so I'm pretty sure we're going to hear from you soon, either as part of the R&D of Lyft or sometime later in the future. Thank you for coming. And now we are going to be moving into the investor Q&A, where we'll take some more questions with our second guest. Peter, Lukas, thank you so much for coming, for being here. And we are now going to be adding Christopher Priebe, who is a partner at Global Founders Capital. We are going to change the slide very quickly and jump right in. Christopher, welcome.
Hey guys, can you hear me and see me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. Chris, thank you very much. Chris, it sounds like you're not from the UK. You're from Germany, right?
Yes.
Tell us how you joined GFC and what brought you here to London.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate being able to speak here. A couple of things to myself. So like you guessed already, I'm German. Joined Global Founders roughly 2.5 years ago to be involved as a partner on the early stage side. Previously, I spent 3 years investing in growth and private equity buyouts in a company called TA Associates. That's an American company that's already 50 years old, has raised 15 funds, but more on the later stage / buyout side of things. There I was mostly focused on software and fintech investments across Europe, but that was a global firm also where most of the investments were done in the US. And before that, I spent 3-4 years in investment banking at Merrill Lynch, where I spent most of my time on tech. When I was there was a big IPO market boom, so I worked on a lot of IPOs. Many of which happened, and a lot of them also that didn't happen and IPO'd later, which is also where I met some of the employees and founders of GFC, because some of their companies that were IPO'd back then, including Zalando and HelloFresh and Rocket Internet, and yeah, that's my story. And,
okay, can we briefly dive into GFC, how the fund was started? You say you focus on early stage, and you also mentioned Rocket Internet. Can you tell us how the Rocket Internet fits into the picture, and what is the basics, the basic investment thesis for GFC?
Yeah. So maybe just to talk only about GFC for now, and I will explain the history and the connection then afterwards. So
Okay.
GFC, Global Founders Capital, it's a VC fund. The latest fund generation was closed just very recently, and we started investing from that fund last year. So that's our second fund, and that's a $1.5 billion vehicle. And we invest from this vehicle globally from 15 offices. We're a team of around 80 people. And what we focus on in terms of investment thesis, we're generalists, and we typically like to invest early, which means we can be first or second money in, which means seed or pre-seed stage. That's our preferred way to invest. But we are overall stage agnostic, which means whenever we feel like companies that we missed, or whenever we come across a company that's growing 10x, it doesn't really matter what stage it is in. We're interested, and we will be looking at it. So that means we can invest in series A, B, C, D, E, F, G, etc. But in terms of number of investments made, it's for sure a large focus on seed and pre-seed. But we're
and how many deals have you done last year, for example? Because it sounds like it's a very big fund. For a super early stage, it's a big fund, which means you do lots of deals. How many deals have you done last year?
Probably around 100 deals in total across the globe. Yeah.
And how many of them are from the UK?
Last year from the UK were 9 or 10, depending on what you define closing or sourcing, but let's call it 10 roughly.
Okay, and so you say GFC is focusing on super early stage, is agnostic, so any industry. And what is unusual now is this climate. And we have this question from Jay here. In terms of the current climate, is there a general reluctance to fund new startups right now? How do you see it as a VC? Because normally it seems like the whole Silicon Valley got frozen. What's your take on investing, not investing, wait, not wait?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right that there's a lot of uncertainty in the market right now, and not just in the market, but just like with everybody, right? People are concerned about their health, people are concerned about their jobs, businesses are concerned about their employees, revenues, customers. So I would say it's most of all a time of uncertainty right now, and a lot of sectors have been hit very hard, very fast. So if you're in a travel or hospitality or in the commercial real estate sector, things are looking pretty bad there, and companies have already started becoming or getting into troubles. So the impact on the economy is real. It's happening. Unemployment is spiking, and the problem is, though, it's very hard to say when this will end, how bad it will get, what's the time frame here. Of course, there are all kinds of speculations and different people with different opinions, but the reality is nobody really knows. So for a VC, it makes sense to, rather than make rush decisions, see how this plays out as the information spreads. Every day the situation could change and is changing, yes. Which is why a lot of VCs have slowed down their investing activity. And I think although the US is slightly behind, yeah. I think you mentioned Silicon Valley. Although US is probably slightly behind in terms of the virus spreading, I think the US VCs have reacted probably more with more rigor and with more sense of urgency than probably others, because a lot of these firms have been around for much longer than non-US firms, and they've been through this several times. And the reaction, as you said, is quite harsh.
Yes, that is concerned. Now, a few VCs made some headlines now recently in the last few days, because in tough times, the way we are gets amplified. So if somebody is a bad person, he or she becomes a worse person. If somebody is a good person, becomes better because they want to help others. Some VCs made headlines because there were some articles about how some VCs, even though they promise and they sign a term sheet, they kind of step away, and this has a big impact on companies. How do you see this kind of behavior as a VC? And do you think this is the a good way to react when you're on the market, or this should be done differently?
So of course I've heard the stories where people just walked away, VCs walked away or renegotiated terms or just slashed terms close to closing dates. So obviously that's
or slashed valuations by half, for example.
Yeah, or more even. So of course, so I think if I look at our investment activity, this week we've approved 2 deals, the week before 3 deals, the week before 8. So it's not like deals are not happening anymore. Okay. But if I look at the type of deals, most of them were early stage deals, which means companies have little revenue, or they haven't launched yet. And where there's no revenue, you can't lose revenue. So that's kind of an advantage of being a very early stage company. Yes. But if you have to think about it, if you're a growth stage company with a large cost base and your revenue suddenly goes down, and it's hard to say how long it will stay down, if it will go down further, where it's going to balance. It's very hard to say what your runway actually is, and your revenue de facto is impacted, right? So if you think in terms of valuation multiples, kind of your real valuation does go down. So it's, of course, it's not a nice thing to do. I can somewhat understand why, you know, some things have to reevaluate it. But I think we try to not even get into that situation, right? Usually when we make investments, typically we move pretty fast. On the early stage side, it's usually a matter of days. On growth side, it's maybe a matter of 1 or 2 weeks, which means, you know, 1 week ago, you could have already, or even 2 weeks ago, it was already on the agenda that something is happening. So we looked ahead and figured if there's any risk that we would not go ahead with a deal, we wouldn't even go into it and issue a term sheet. So pulling term sheet is affecting reputations for a long time. So we absolutely try to never do it. And I think we haven't done it in the last 3 weeks since Corona has been on the table, at least not that I'm aware of.
Okay, we have a question I'd like to take from Nitish, and he wants to know whether any sectors have spiked in terms of pitches coming during coronavirus.
Yeah, of course. Actually, I just have a little cheat sheet here. So obviously, we think about what kind of sectors, subsectors are affected, neutral, or even have a positive uplift. I would like to add, though, that you know, there are going to be a lot of companies that will have temporary spikes. You always have to ask yourself how much of that spike is sustainable. So if you know, there are a lot of COVID-19 testing companies out there now, and of course you can make you know, a good margin on that for the next, you know, 12 to 24 months. But is that a sustainable business? Probably not. So I would always think about, okay, is this a fundamental shift that's happening here that I could benefit from if I'm looking for new models, or is there something temporary? I do think, you know, some things are fundamental. So if you look at, for example, online grocery delivery, right? The model has been around forever, and online shift has been happening for a long time. But there has been a recent survey in the US where they surveyed a few hundred households, and obviously volumes are up massively. I think 400% or 500% or so. And they surveyed some people, and I think 40% of those households were first-time ever users of, you know, online grocery delivery. Yes. And I think it's likely to say that some of these people will, you know, become customers. Maybe not all of them will stay. Some will go back to buy offline again when the crisis is gone, but some of them will stay. And that effectively means that your TAM, your total addressable market, just overnight has, you know, potentially doubled in some of these spaces. So it's definitely something to think about. But to go into that question a bit more precisely, so obviously travel is massively affected, right? So people stop going to work, major events are canceled, people don't go to hotels anymore, people are not on trains anymore, people are not flying anymore, which means a lot of logistics companies are heavily affected, and the booking engines behind them and the software vendors in that ecosystem are affected. But on the other hand, it means that remote work is on the rise, right? Practically everybody who's still working right now, or most people, certainly in office jobs or other non-essential works, are working remotely. And some people realize, it's actually working quite all right. It's kind of working all right for me. I know it's working quite all right for many other people. So I think there will be a shift that will partly be sustainable, and there'll be a lot of new business models that can be explored there. I think in the travel space generally is probably difficult, but if you look at on the health space, the shift to online has been happening, but fairly slowly. If you look at telehealth, there has been a massive spike in recent weeks. And will that be sustainable? I think similar to grocery delivery, I think some of these people will stay on the apps and keep using it because they realize, it's convenient. And a lot of the conversion is also just getting people to download the app and register and put in your payment information. And once you have people signed up, I think the barrier to keep them rather than converting them in a regular market like normal customers, it's just easier. So I think that some of that will stay. So online dating, gaming, esports, delivery, anything that is essential, food. So if you look at companies like Delivery Hero or HelloFresh, their share prices are performing pretty well. Anything in mobility, Uber suffering, Airbnb suffering,
okay.
Yeah, what else have I? Yeah,
next
some
question.
of these things that we've seen.
Yeah, moving on a little bit into in terms of the pitching part, because that's very important. We have also startups which are keen to have a funding round close and so on. How many companies do you see per year? In terms of how many emails do you see? How many decks do you browse through? And how many companies do you see in person out of that?
So I would I don't have the exact numbers in front of me right now, but
if you look at dozens or hundreds,
it's certainly in the thousands. In a year, a year has maybe 250 working days. For sure. I mean, looking at companies could be scrolling across their LinkedIn profile or coming on their website. I think that already counts as looking at a company, because if it sparks your interest, you would reach out.
Yes.
So for sure, it's in the thousands. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the pitching part, because that's a part where most companies could do much better and do many mistakes. When you see a company in person, what attributes do you pay most attention to, and what attributes do you see founders do the most mistakes in?
I think the most important thing for a meeting is when I leave that meeting, that I don't have any question marks in my mind, that I understand the founder's story, his background, his or her background. I understand what's his vision, why is he or she doing this. I understand what is the product, how exactly does it work. The founder should be very good at explaining it very easily and quickly. And very importantly, and I think that's sometimes or oftentimes a reason where we like the founder and we like the overall idea, but we don't end up investing, is because there's no clear view on the go-to-market. And go-to-market, having vision on the go-to-market means you oftentimes just knowing the market really well, which means you may have worked in a company that's the leading company in that market before, or you may have some other reason why you know the market well. But I think the go-to-market is oftentimes with companies that we do decide to spend time with, the reason why we then don't end up investing. But oftentimes I think, the founder story has to be very clear. And oftentimes I do think I ask too many questions on, explaining what this role was about. Oh, you mentioned you worked in tech, but what does that mean? What employer, what position, what was your responsibility? What was the outcome of that activity? And oftentimes I do have to do too much asking to kind of connect the dots and see the the storyline there.
Okay, we have a question here on Slido from Miroslav, and he's asking, what are the predominant factors you evaluate as an investor when assessing the early stage startups, and what are the biggest mistakes? So you already discussed the factors. Can you mention some mistakes which the founders do when they talk to you?
I think it's hard to put it into like specific points. So I think there's something it's something also about a feeling, right? So I think you have to leave that meeting excited about the founder, excited about the idea, excited about the market. I think these three things are most important. Yeah, it's the founder or the founders and the team. It's the idea, but also the market. And idea and market kind of go together. But ideally, the market has to be big enough, and ideally, it's growing. Or it's just at its infancy, but there's a potential for it to be big eventually. And the founder has to have a good fit with the idea. Why is it you that now should build a startup? Is it random? Is there a connection? Have you thought about this before? Is there something that makes sense to get me excited? Why you're the person that can build a big company here? And in the end, I just have to leave that meeting without question marks and just be excited about the opportunity and excited about the person that I really want to work with him and her. Because I feel like there's a clear vision of what the product should look like. There's a clear vision on how we're going to acquire customers and who are our customers. Because oftentimes I hear pitches where it's more of a vague concept, and people think a lot about the product, and that's good. I think product is very important, but sometimes people forget that product doesn't sell itself, and oftentimes actually it's the company that sells better and maybe doesn't have the best product that will take a market.
Yes. Okay. I'd like to ask you about some industries. So, for example, we now had Blue Vision Labs. They were in the augmented reality space. Last year we were having blockchain was super hot, and we have these waves of an industry becomes super fashionable, then it kind of goes down, and we have this typical curve. What industries do you see being big, being very important in the next 2-3 years? Which industries excite you going forward?
I mean, it's very hard to say. I think in terms of horizontals, that's easier to say. So, software has been on the rise for a long time, and I think it will continue to rise. Things will continue to shift towards the cloud. Things will continue to move online. So I think the horizontal trends are easier to define. In terms of markets, whether that's insurance or banking or health. I mean, if I look at our trends, so we've invested more and more in health over the last 12 to 18 months. So we're excited about that. Obviously, fintech has been on the rise for a while, but there are already some large companies in there. What makes these markets attractive is that they're very big, right? Everybody has a bank account. Everybody's doing transactions every day. Everybody needs medical assistance or well-being products. So I think ultimately it's the large markets that are the most interesting ones, because there's just more market to play with, and if you find an interesting model to take a space of that market, that means you can build a big company, right? So it's obviously fintech. I think it's health, but health has its difficulties, especially in Europe, because there's a lot of government paid schemes, which in the US or in the UK, for example, you have to sell to all the different NHS funds separately. In the US, it's slightly easier, also because the pain in the system is much bigger. So healthcare is a complicated one, but there's a lot of pain that can be fixed. And there we are particularly interested in software and fintech as well. So the underlying infrastructure and pipes that can help make the system more efficient.
Okay. Let's talk about equity for a minute. So you are coming in very early, which means the valuations of companies are quite low. What are your recommendations for a typical startup? Is there any any limit which you would advise not to spend more equity on the first round, on the second round? When it comes to pre-seed or seed, do you have any recommendations for founders who are raising for the first time?
Sorry, I was just thinking about the last question. There was one thing I wanted to add. So we were actually quite active in that as well, and that is alternative foods. It's not really tech, but I do think that consumers have become a lot more conscious about their health, but also impact on the environment that the current kind of food ecosystem has, and which is why we invest a lot in alternatives, in dairy, milk, ice cream, wheat. And again, it's a huge market, and I think consumers are thinking very differently to what they did 10 years ago. So just to add to the last question.
Okay, sure.
Sorry, and then the second question was about?
The question is about equity. So a lot of founders, they start to raise for the first time. You come very early, which means they have to learn how to do this. Giving too much equity is as bad as giving probably too little. So do you have any recommendations for first-time founders when they do, for example, a pre-seed round or a seed round? How do you normally do that?
Yeah, I mean, if you raise from a VC and it's a VC round, or it's even if it's a convertible note, typically you could expect to give away something between 10 and 20%. I think it depends on how big the round is. So if the round is big enough to really get you to a significantly better step to raise a significantly larger round later, probably the percentage is closer to 20%. If it's just a small round that enables you to then raise the next seed round, or whatever you want to call it, the next round that is certainly not a Series A, then maybe you can get away with less than 10%. But if it's a meaningful amount, so let's say anything between 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 and $1 million, usually more towards in the middle of 10 and 20% towards the 20%.
Okay, what are your thoughts on founders' wages?
Obviously, founders are massively incentivized by equity, right? So I think founders should keep that in mind when they set their own wages. And also, they can set a precedent by showing that basically, if somebody asks for a wage that is higher than the founder's wage, or if the founder's wage is lower, I think you have a better negotiating position to also pay maybe a slightly lower wage to some of the top employees that you want to get. If you pay yourself a huge salary, then others will want that as well. So I think by leading by example and taking a lower salary, I think it shows that you're leading by example of having a good cost base, because if you have a lower cost base, you have a higher runway and a higher chance of getting to the next round. And B, it puts you in a better position also to negotiate with employees that you want to get on board.
Okay, we have a question here from Slido from Stephanie. Besides the money, what do you bring to startups? What is the average ticket you invest?
So the average ticket in a first investment, which is usually a seed or kind of pre-Series A stage, I would say in Europe is somewhere between 600,000 and $1 million. So call it 700,000 or 800,000. Typically, we like to invest less than $1 million and start working with founders to get to know them better and get to know the product better and understand if the go-to-market strategy is working out before we want to invest more. And then in the second investment, we would invest usually quite a bit more than that.
Okay, next question is from Bossa. Have you ever turned down a good business idea because there was no rapport with the founder?
Many times, and it's hard. It's very hard because sometimes ideas are great, and sometimes the fit or the question, why should this founder be the one really building a big company in this space, just can't be answered well enough, or the vision on the go-to-market is just not precise enough. And keep in mind, like, you have to have startups are burning cash, right? So you only have a limited amount of time to get to the next round, which means you can't afford to experiment around too much unless you are really, really conservative on your burn rate, which a lot of founders are not. So we want to see a really clear vision on the go-to-market. And often I've come across great ideas before, and it really killed me to turn them down. But yeah, it happens.
Okay. when you start working with a company, you invest in them. What is the most common need they have from you? Is it advice? Is it opening to a network? Or how do you help them most?
Mm-hmm. I think the very valuable stuff is the answering a difficult question with the right answer at the right time. And these can be very little things, you know. It can be the things that can mean your company makes it big or goes bankrupt. It's things like, you know, should I now go to the US? Yes or no, right? It's like a 50-50 answer, and it can either make or break a company. So I think seemingly simple questions like these that where experience can significantly increase your chance of picking the right answer. I think that's a big value. And then the more kind of day-to-day, it's not day-to-day, but I think it's valuable, but it's not as crucial, is, you know, making the right introduction to somebody on, if let's say you have an operational problem, or you want to hire a certain person, or you need somebody to convince that person to join you, to help with these little things, and also to connect between founders, because a lot of founders have similar issues. Every company is different, but a lot of the problems are the same. So connecting at the right time is also valuable.
Yes. How do you think your
and actually, I want to add one thing, and that's actually what I'm realizing a lot now, especially. A lot of founders need guidance on how to manage their cash, because naturally founders are focused on the upside, right? And that's great. That's how it should be, because in the end, we all want to build a big company.
Yes.
But on the cash management side, you have to prepare also for the downside, because if you don't manage to raise that next round, you're kind of dead in the water. And that's where a lot of startup journeys end, not because the product is bad or the founder is bad. It's just because you didn't make it to the next step and you don't find somebody to finance your burn in the future. So I think that's also where we, as experienced investors, but also operators. So I actually didn't get into that connection with Rocket Internet before, but before raising the fund, we were actually building companies, which means operating and also investing our own money. And that's where, you know, that knowledge comes in handy to understand, you know, when is the right time to ramp up your costs and when is it to not do that or ramp it down, which is what you have to do now.
That's very useful. Okay, Chris, this is very, very informative. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. I think the time is up now. I hope you will come to our event again, and you know, once we start doing this in a physical form, we're gonna come together again, hopefully. So thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, guys.
What is the best way to reach you and to keep in touch?
Yeah, it's Christopher@globalfounderscapital.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. Just drop me an email or connect with me there. Usually I'm trying to be responsive there.
Nice. Thank you so much. This is Chris, and now is the time where we would like to say thank you. We'd like to say thank you to our partners and you know, to the organizations which helped us make this happen. But we would not be able to do this without our team. So the team is the slide before is you know, Peter and Tim. These are co-directors. They're doing an amazing job. Peter actually did a lot of work in terms of putting together great questions for Chris. The rest of the team we have is, you can see them here. They're usually in the room, but now they are here online. We have Lorelai, we have Antonio, we have Steffi, we have Efrat, and we have Eliza. I promise next time we come together, we can help you. These are the areas how our team can usually help you. You can find us on LinkedIn. If we can help you, feel free to reach out. And now we'd like to say thanks to our partners again. So we have Louis Silken, which is a law firm which helps founders and early stage companies all the way to IPOs with legal work. We're working with them ourselves, and we are super happy. And they make our job much easier because any legal question we have, we get the answers. So feel free to reach out if you want to, if you have any legal question. We have also a company called Hardsoft. This is an amazing company because it's a self-made family company which is doing a great job. They're partnering with Apple, and what they do is they help startups run their companies more efficiently because they can lease hardware like mobile phones, smartphones, PCs, laptops, and so on, which means they don't have to spend the cash upfront, but they spend it as they go. So if you need anything from them, feel free to reach out. And I'd like to also say thanks to Mate, who is helping fast-growing companies find engineers and developers remotely. And this is it. Our next talk is going to be taking place in the same way. It's going to be happening online. It's going to be in April. On the 23rd of April, we're going to have a co-founder of the company, which was the largest technology exit in the history of Europe, a company called ARM, a chip maker, who left the company and now built a VC company, Amadeus Capital Partners. And he'll be joining us all the way from New Zealand because he spends his winters in New Zealand and now he can come back in the next few weeks. So he'll be joining us from New Zealand. And the last thing we want to tell you about is today we had a second product surgery, and we had the product surgery with product experts from Forward Partners. We selected 4 companies where we give product insights and advice, and we'll tell you more about it later. So before the next event, we'll do another product surgery. Feel free to join us. Now, thank you for coming and being here. And if you want, we're gonna leave this open and you can network. You can basically use the slider to say hi to each other and maybe connect on LinkedIn. We'll be closing this channel in about 10, 15 minutes. So feel free to say hi, network. And this is all from us. Thank you for coming, for being here, and looking forward to see you in 4 weeks' time. Bye-bye.